In an undisclosed lab, where illegal meth is being produced in the middle of the night, things take a turn for the worse when the DEA swarms in, shooting down anyone who tries to escape. Though the criminals attempt to fight back, the overwhelming gunfire causes newly made liquid drugs to spill, seeping into the ground and contaminating the nearby rivers. Soon, a pandemic spreads among the alligators, which become dangerously aggressive due to the drug exposure, leading to violent attacks reported on the news. Meanwhile, alligator eggs surge in market value, selling for a fortune. Kylie, a young biology student, gets distracted by her phone during class, prompting the professor to ask her a question about gatos as apex predators. Though hesitant at first, she answers correctly just as class ends for the day. In the hallway, she runs into her friend Alice, and they hug excitedly, happy to see each other after a long time. Alice pulls her along to meet the rest of their group for their trip, but Kylie's mood shifts when she notices Malika. Alice quickly apologizes for Malika's presence, explaining that she was also a friend of Jamie, Kylie's late brother. They've planned to scatter his ashes in the Keys, which is why they're traveling. Since Malika has a car and Alice sold hers, Alice thought it was a practical choice. Kylie is surprised by this news, but Alice brushes it off, promising to explain later and urging her to be patient before heading downstairs. As they drive out, Kylie curiously asks Alice about her car, knowing how much it meant to her. After some hesitation, Alice finally opens up. Apparently, her mother is at it again, taking every penny she had, totaling $12,000, and leaving her broke. With no other choice, Alice had to sell her car to survive. She's also dropped out of school and now works multiple shifts just to get by. Kylie feels sorry for her, but Alice brushes it off and changes the subject, asking if she brought Jamie's ashes. In the front seat, Malika blasts loud music but grows annoyed when she notices Alice smoking in the back. Sam, another friend, laughs at the tension. When they arrive at a hotel for the night, they gather around the pool, enjoying the evening together. After Malika leaves to grab some drinks, Alice admits she's not that bad, but Kylie confesses that she finds her unbearable. But then, in a more serious tone, Alice tells Kylie that at some point, she'll have to start moving on from Jamie. Kylie doesn't understand why people keep saying that. How does anyone move on from someone they loved? Overwhelmed, she wishes people would stop telling her how to grieve and storms out of the pool. Alice calls after her, but Kylie doesn't respond. Later that night, Kylie takes a walk while watching an old video of Jamie, which stirs up deep emotions. She reminisces about how he always wanted her to ride his bike, his voice in the video filled with the enthusiasm he always had. Jamie had once told her that hiding away and preserving life wasn't the same as living it. The memory hits hard, and Kylie chokes back a sob as the pain resurfaces. Back upstairs, she notices Malika and Sam slipping into a room together but says nothing before heading into her own. The next morning, Malika is already up and full of energy, megaphone in hand, shouting at everyone to wake up and get ready to hit the road. She pounds on their doors relentlessly. No wonder Kylie can't stand her. They arrive at a gas station, and the others scatter into the convenience store. Kylie steps out and notices several newspapers featuring reports of alligator attacks in the bayou, leaving her with an eerie feeling. To make matters worse, she hears a creepy laugh nearby and turns to see an old man sitting with a newspaper in his hands. He begins speaking like a maniac, but before Kylie can make sense of his words, Malika calls her back to the car, eager to get going. Their next stop is an airport, Malika's surprise for them. Alice and Sam aren't thrilled, knowing Kylie is afraid of flying, but Malika brushes off their concerns. To her, this is the fastest way to the Keys, giving them more time to spend there. Frank, the pilot and owner of the airline, approaches them, but they're caught off guard when they realize he's intoxicated and smoking. Sam points out how dangerous this is, but Frank dismisses him, even calling him a sissy before walking off. Seeing how bad the situation is, Malika suggests they drive instead, but Kylie insists they take the plane since they're already there. After all, they're in this together. Before boarding, Frank gives a brief overview of their flight path and destination before ushering the passengers onto the plane. Once in the air, a passenger named Rufus begins making loud business calls, ignoring safety regulations. Kylie asks him to turn his phone off, but he dismisses her. Sam joins in, but Rufus continues talking. Frustrated, another passenger, Maud, snaps at him to stop, but he still refuses. Her husband finally stands up to grab Rufus's phone, only to hit his head on the low ceiling and collapse. Almost instantly, the plane begins malfunctioning. Panic spreads as Frank and his co-pilot, Ray, struggle to regain control. The engine catches fire, the doors start ripping off, and passengers scream in terror. Moments later, the plane crashes into a river, leaving people injured, with wreckage and luggage scattered everywhere. Kylie, dazed from a head wound, loses consciousness briefly but is jolted awake by Alice. After helping her out of the water, Kylie regains her bearings. Everyone seems to have survived, except Maud's husband, who is missing, leaving her in shock. Kylie instructs Alice to warm Maud up while she rushes to help Frank, who is tending to an injured passenger, Zoe. Noticing Zoe's twisted arm, Frank asks for a belt, and Kylie quickly urges Sam to hand his over. Kylie quickly wraps the belt around Zoe's arm, pulling it tight with Frank's help. Zoe screams in pain while her husband, Dom, holds her for comfort. With that settled, Frank starts calling out for Ray, but there's no response. Sam suggests finding a phone to call for help, but there's no signal in the swamp they've crashed in. Kylie retrieves her bag, relieved to find Jamie's ashes still intact. Alice urges Frank to stop searching alone and insists they wait for a rescue team, but Kylie quickly realizes that no one is coming. Malika reluctantly admits it was cheaper to fly unchartered, and Kylie points out that if the plane's black box wasn't on, no one knows where they are. Given that they've crashed in the largest wetland system in the US, their chances of being found are slim. Even if a rescue team is dispatched, locating them would be nearly impossible. With no shelter, food, or water, waiting isn't an option. Frank agrees and suggests they walk, but Maud protests, saying they need a better plan. Frank explains that they tried to turn back north to an airfield when the problem started, but now they could be miles away. Frustrated, Maud confronts Frank about being intoxicated while flying, but Malika snaps at her to shut up and mourn her husband. Outraged, Maud shoves Malika to the ground, ready to attack her, but Kylie quickly steps in and diffuses the situation. Taking control, Kylie insists their only option is to move. She urges everyone to gather phones, food, and clothes to take with them. While the group scrambles to collect supplies, Alice hears an eerie clattering sound in the distance. Against her better judgment, she goes to investigate. She stumbles upon a cluster of alligator eggs and picks one up, an idea already forming in her head. Knowing how valuable they are, she considers selling them to make the money she desperately needs. Meanwhile, the others continue gathering supplies. Rufus finds his phone but quietly hides it in his pocket. Out of the 5 phones they recover, 4 are spoiled, and 1 has no signal. Just then, Kylie spots Ray floating in the water and immediately alerts the others. Frank rushes in first, swimming toward Ray, with Kylie and Sam following closely behind. Before they can reach him, a massive alligator erupts from the water and drags Ray under, thrashing him apart in a bloody frenzy. Everyone watches in horror. Realizing they're in grave danger, Frank, Kylie, and Sam frantically swim back to shore while the others shout for them to hurry. Tension rises as the alligator lurks beneath the surface, but they make it back unharmed. Catching her breath, Kylie remarks that the alligator shouldn't have attacked so aggressively. She suspects there's a nest nearby because alligators are territorial. Injured or not, they can't stay there. Frank points out a direction, and the group begins moving, though Maud hesitates, unwilling to leave without her husband. Eventually, she follows, and moments later, his body is revealed. His arm lies detached under a brush, while the rest of his body is partially submerged in the water, pinned by a heavy log. A grim and tragic sight. That night, an alligator notices the missing egg and snarls in anger. It seems like trouble is brewing. After walking for a while, Maud admits she can't keep up due to her heart condition. Malika, ever spiteful, makes a snide remark about Maud's life choices. Kylie suggests they camp at a clearing since she hasn't seen any gator tracks, and it's solid ground away from water. Malika, annoyed by Kylie's leadership, protests, but the group agrees that Kylie is the most qualified to make decisions. Frank suggests making a fire, and as Kylie reaches for a lighter in Alice's bag, Alice quickly stops her, insisting on getting it herself. Well, her hidden egg can't be discovered now. As they sit around the fire, Kylie suggests sleeping back to back to stay off the damp ground. Malika makes another sarcastic remark, prompting Alice to snap and tell her to shut up. Frank offers Kylie a drink and even jokes about throwing Malika to the gators if things get worse, making Kylie laugh. She declines the drink, preferring to stay sober, but Frank takes a gulp and passes it to Maud, who looks like she needs it. Later that night, while everyone sleeps, Rufus sneaks away to relieve himself. Just then, his phone rings. Panicked, he fumbles to silence it, but it slips from his grasp in the darkness. Scrambling to find it, he finally picks up the call, but the signal is too weak to make out what the person is saying on the other end. Just as he tries to talk out, an alligator lunges from the shadows, slamming his head into the ground. He lets out a blood-curdling scream, but it's cut short as the gator drags him away. By morning, the group discovers his mangled body. Horrified, Maud retches at the gruesome sight. Kylie, disturbed, questions why the gators are attacking so aggressively since it doesn't make sense. When she presses Frank for answers, he hesitates. Clearly, he knows something. Under pressure from the group, Frank finally admits there have been rumors. Gators acting strangely, unnaturally fast, covering huge distances, and attacking with an unusual frenzy. Normally, they avoid humans, but now they seem to be hunting. The locals have even named one particularly vicious gator, Christina, the scarred one. Just then, Alice spots a cabin in the distance. Kylie sees it as a vantage point to spot potential threats. Frank agrees, and the group heads toward it, leaving Rufus's body behind. As they reach a clearing, Maud excitedly points out the cabin, relieved at the prospect of rest, while the others follow suit. However, Kyle notices something strange and orders everyone to stand still. Frank wonders what she sees, and she points out 3 different spots where gators are waiting. This is a very bad situation. Realizing the danger, Frank quietly tells her that not everyone will make it, but Kyle instructs Maud, who's in front, to stay still while they devise a plan. She suggests they all run together, as gators don't attack anything bigger than them. Before she can finish, a gator lunges at Maud, dragging her across the dirt as she screams in terror. It's now or never. The rest of the group bolts toward the cabin, the gator chasing them with terrifying speed. Just as they make it inside, the gator clamps down on Zoe's leg. They frantically try to free her, using sticks to strike the gator while Dom pulls at the wailing Zoe. At last, her leg is released, badly battered but still intact. But the danger isn't over. The gator tries to force its way inside, and they push against the wooden door to keep it out. Kyle urges everyone to work together, but instead of helping, Malika tries to break another part of the cabin to escape. After a fierce struggle, they manage to shut the door, securing it with a bamboo stick. The gator thrashes against it, but after a tense moment, it finally retreats, its snarls fading into the distance. Just then, they begin hearing Maud's screams for help echoing from afar. The atmosphere turns grim because there's nothing they can do. Kyle turns her attention to Zoe, tending to her injuries, but the tension remains. The sound of gators clashing in the water keeps them on edge. Kyle suggests they rest in shifts, and the group agrees. That night, a heavy storm begins. Meanwhile, a gator watches the cabin from a distance, unknowingly to them. Inside, Kyle is haunted by a dream, reliving the moment Jamie was shot in a store robbery. Jamie tries to stop the robber but is attacked. Kyle begins crawling toward a pistol to save Jamie, but she's too late. The robber shoots first, ending Jamie's life, which makes Kyle cry out in agony. The next morning, Sam wakes Kyle and shows her a map he found in the cabin. Studying it together, they spot a building. Tracing the route, they figure that it might lead them to help, or at least a working radio. Frank, however, warns that he's never seen the building on any map. It could be a dead end. Still, they decide to take the risk. Sam apologizes for not being there when Zoe needed him, but Malika interrupts, furious. She argues that leaving the cabin is a mistake since they're safer there. Kyle counters that they have no food, no help, and Zoe's condition is worsening. Their options are clear: stay and pass away, or take a chance at survival. Malika, however, refuses to accept it. Turning on Zoe, she cruelly accuses her of letting Jamie die, saying everyone blames her. She goes even further, admitting that Jamie was more loved, that Kyle was always the least favorite, and that it should have been Kyle instead. Then she grabs the bag containing Jamie's ashes. Kyle fights back, but Frank steps in, breaking them apart. In the struggle, the bag slips from their grasp, falling into the water. Luckily, the ashes remain intact. Frank urges everyone to put their differences aside and focus on survival. He calls for a vote, those in favor of staying in the cabin and those willing to risk heading out. Only Malika raises her hand to stay, while the rest vote to leave. Well, that settles it, they're definitely leaving the cabin. Frank encourages Kyle to explain how they can navigate the gators, given her knowledge. She advises everyone not to hold their ground if locked in a gator's stare. The best option is to run without looking back. Running in a zigzag would also be useless because gators can reach speeds of up to 24 miles per hour, but they tire quickly. If anyone gets caught, she warns against wasting energy trying to free themselves, even if it's their head stuck. A gator's jaws hold 80 razor-sharp teeth, capable of tearing through nearly anything. The only way to escape is to strike the gator's snout and gouge its eyes before it drags them into the water. Once submerged, the gator will spin its prey violently, shredding it to pieces before stashing the remains under a rock for later. It's gruesome information, but everyone listens intently. They head out, ready for whatever comes next. Sam, in charge of the map, leads the way. After some time, Zoe becomes exhausted and collapses, with Dom helping her. He reminds her of their daughter back home, urging her to push through. Malika, ever heartless, suggests leaving Zoe behind if she can't keep up, making the group displeased with her lack of empathy. Zoe, frustrated, mutters that she wishes Malika would be the next to pass on, making Dom chuckle. Well, who would blame her at this point? Determined not to give Malika the satisfaction, Zoe, with Dom's help, pulls herself up and presses on. Suddenly, Sam signals for them to stop. Tension fills the air, but it's just the river. A wave of relief washes over them as they rush toward it, only to find their path blocked by water from the storm. Malika immediately suggests turning back, but Kyle disagrees. Instead, she sees an opportunity. The current flows toward the sea, southeast, which is the direction of the building on the map. Frank catches on, realizing Kyle wants to build a raft. Alice is skeptical about how to achieve this, but Dom reassures the group that it's doable. The area is full of logs, tree bark, and other materials they can use, plus their clothes to tie it all together. The challenge is making it large enough for 8 people. Fortunately, with the strong current, they won't be on it for long. Kyle estimates it'll take a quarter of the time to reach their destination. Malika reminds her of the gators, but Kyle explains that due to the storm's humidity, the gators are likely hiding to regulate their body temperature. That gives them a window to build before nightfall. Alice hesitantly asks what happens if they don't finish in time. Kyle's response is blunt, admitting that the gators will resurface in numbers. Malika insists they'll be torn apart, but Kyle is confident that if they move fast, they'll be fine. With no better option, the group gets to work. Alice, Sam, and Frank gather logs while Dom stays with Zoe, promising to get her home, urging her to be strong. While heading back from collecting wood, Alice hears a faint snarl. She tries to get the guys' attention, but they're too focused on carrying a heavy log. Instead of going with them, she decides to investigate alone. When Frank and Sam return to the others, Kyle immediately notices Alice is missing. The guys are surprised about this, since she was right behind them. Meanwhile, Alice spots the alligator. With no hesitation, she grips her log tightly and prepares to strike. Thankfully, Alice returns to the group, unharmed but covered in gator blood. She urges everyone to leave immediately, announcing that the gators are coming. As they scramble onto the raft, Kyle notices the bag containing Jamie's ashes still on the grass. Without hesitation, Sam rushes to retrieve the bag. Just as he grabs it, gators emerge from the water. He barely manages to swim back, climbing onto the raft just in time. They paddle furiously, but the gators are closing in fast. Realizing they won't outrun them, Zoe whispers her love to Dom before throwing herself into the water. Dom screams in horror, trying to reach for her, but Frank holds him back. The gators immediately descend on Zoe, dragging her under. The group watches, paralyzed by grief, and Dom's agonized cries echo over the water. Thanks to Zoe's sacrifice, they all continue their journey on the raft without encountering any more dangers. Eventually, they reach the building marked on the map. Relief washes over everyone, except Dom, who remains shattered by Zoe's loss. Kyle begins encouraging him to be strong, assuring him they are almost free. She feels Zoe's sacrifice should be for nothing, and Don agrees. Meanwhile, Frank notices bullets scattered on the ground. As he inspects them, he theorizes that the building was raided by the DIA. He deduces that it must be a drug lab of some sorts, since it isn't even marked on the map. Guess this must be the same meth lab from before. Ignoring the tension, Malika heads toward the entrance without hesitation. Frank stops her, but Sam defends her. Frustrated, Frank warns them to stay quiet, but Malika, as reckless as ever, starts yelling for anyone inside. Unbeknownst to them, an alligator lurks inside the building. Inside, they find torches and follow bloodstains smeared across the floor. They are all appalled by the gruesome sight, wondering what could have gone wrong. Eventually, they come across a large container and several huge structures. Malika suggests splitting up to cover more ground, and despite the risks, Frank agrees. He heads off with Malika and Alice while Kyle, Sam, and Dom take another path. When they reach a fork in the hallway, Frank asks Alice to check one route while he and Malika investigate the other. Meanwhile, Kyle's group stumbles upon stacks of drugs. Kyle suspects that it must be the cause of the gators' strange behavior in the first place. Suddenly, an injured man stumbles out, startling them. Back with Frank and Malika, tensions boil over. Frank finally snaps, accusing Malika of selfishness. She's been willing to sacrifice anyone just to save herself. In a flash of rage, he shoves her off the stairs. She screams as she dangles from a metal beam, barely holding on. The others try to ask the wounded man for information, but he only mumbles that they're everywhere before passing on. Meanwhile, Malika screams for help, pleading for forgiveness from Frank. Alice comes out to the other side and meets Kyle and the others, making them wonder where Frank and Malika are. Frank suddenly realizes what he's done, as terror begins settling in. Before he can pull her up, a massive gator lunges from the darkness, clamping its jaws around his head, taking him away instantly. Still hanging, Malika cries out, desperately clinging to the beam. Just as her grip weakens, Kyle and the others arrive in time to pull her to safety. Shaken and overwhelmed, Malika breaks down in tears. Kyle reassures her that she's okay, though Frank is lost. Between sobs, Malika apologizes for her cruel behavior, admitting that she just misses Jamie. Kyle softens, understanding the situation, and wraps her in a comforting hug. They continue moving through the building until they come across a pool of water, where several gators lay sleeping. Kyle immediately puts off her torch in order not to disturb the gators. After careful observation, she quietly signals a safe path they can take. One by one, they cautiously step past the gators, careful not to make a sound. However, Malika, impatient as ever, rushes ahead without waiting for Alice to cross first. Luckily, Alice makes it through without incident. Sam is the last to go, moving with tense precision. But just as he nears the other side, his foot brushes against a cluster of eggs, making him stumble to the ground. THW moment is filled with high tension, and unfortunately, the gator stirs. Before Sam can react, it lunges, clamping its jaws around his head. Malika screams in horror as Sam thrashes, but it's over in seconds. The gator suddenly tears his head clean off. Everyone is terrified by this sight, and Dom slams the door shut just as the gator charges, while Alice shoves an iron rack against it for reinforcement. Meanwhile, Kyle finds an old radio and frantically calls for help. To their relief, a voice answers. She begins shouting out their location, but before she can get a clear reply, the power cuts out, leaving them in sadness. With no other choice, they decide to keep going. Kyle grabs a gun she finds along the way. While walking through the building, they encounter another gator. The group freezes, paralyzed by fear. Thinking fast, Alice slowly lifts one of the eggs and carefully extends it forward, hoping to appease the gator, while the others look on in fear. The tension is unbearable, as everyone waits for the next move. In an instant, the gator strikes, sinking its teeth into Alice's arm, making her scream in agony. The others are horrified by the attack, and begin urging Kyle to shoot. After a brief hesitation, Kyle fires. The shot makes the gator recoil, tossing Alice aside. As it moves in for another attack, Kyle fires again while Dom and Malika rush to Alice's side. Dom grabs a stick and swings at the gator, but it swipes him away effortlessly. Just as it's about to lunge, Kyle's bullet hits the alligator, shifting its attention. Seizing the moment, Dom carries a wounded Alice while Malika sprints toward the exit. Unfortunately, the gator now turns its attention to Kyle. She pulls the trigger again, only to realize it's empty. With no time to think, Kyle grabs Don's stick and rams it into the gator's eye just as it lunges. It begins thrashing in pain, flinging her against the wall. Dazed but determined, Kyle staggers to her feet and topples a drum full of drugs. The gator struggles with the stick, while Kyle fumbles with her lighter, her hands trembling, every second stretching unbearably long. Finally, the flame catches and she hurls it toward the gator. The room instantly goes up in flames. The others rush back in, relieved at the sight of the burning alligator. Kyle exhales deeply, exhaustion and relief washing over her. Their nightmare is finally over. At dawn, they make their way to the bridge, and the distant sound of a helicopter fills the air. Kyle begins crying in relief, thankful that Residue has finally located them. Sometime later, Kyle heads to the bridge, holding Jamie's ashes. As she scatters them into the wind, she admits that she's living life again. While sobbing, memories of Jamie urging her to ride his bike flood her mind. And this time, she does. Helmet on, she climbs onto the bike and speeds away, embracing the new chapter ahead. Meanwhile, inside the building, a bloodied and battered Frank stirs awake. Though his arm is mangled, he's alive. However, an alligator's growl rumbles nearby. Frank chuckles, taking a swig from his drink, his laughter turning into a wheeze. Oh well, that's a story for another time.